Hey everybody, welcome back to Let's Doula This Mini Class. I'm Kim Racette, your host, and today's topic is protecting the perineum. And I have a really special guest today. Her name is Talia Gilmour, and she is a pelvic floor health physical therapist, which I just think is phenomenal because we didn't have that back in my day when we used to have babies. So I love that we have that now. And I love that there's so many, well, there's not a lot, but we're getting more, I think, physical therapists that are specializing in pelvic floor health. So if you're in another state and are looking for somebody, if you can't find somebody in your state, please reach out to Talia and maybe she could help you virtually or potentially help you find somebody in your area. She is the owner of Holistic Pelvic Health, which I think is a wonderful name. And I'm going to put a link to her website underneath this video, so you can check her website out and contact her if you need to. But today we are going to talk about protecting the perineum. So me and Talia got together the other day and we were just talking about all kinds of things, pregnancy related and pelvic floor health and what physical therapy can do to help. And we came up with so many topics, but today we're going to try to kind of put it into one little nutshell, which is protecting the perineum. Because what we've both discovered that when we talk to when you talk to your patients and when I talk to my clients as a doula, one of their biggest fears is tearing, which I hate that word. We talked about this. I like to say that it's your body just kind of giving a little bit and that just the right amount and just the right area it needs to allow baby to come out. But still, that's a very, one of the top fears I think women have. And we were talking about how there's so many ways to help prevent that. And Talia has a beautiful handout that she gives to mamas, which I read over and I think it's just gorgeous. So if you want her handout, maybe contact her and she can get that to you. And then I have a handout that I give out as well that has a bunch of other things. So right now, what I'd like to talk about is what Talia talks about most in her handout, which is the perineal massage. So do you want to start off with that, Talia?
Yes. Thanks so much for having me. This is so fun. We could talk forever. Yeah, it's so true. I think that is the number one fear that women have going into birth. And I think historically, as providers, we were just kind of like, that's a thing. And what's beautiful is that I really believe that you can heal from anything that you experience during birth with the right support. And there's so much support for women who have tears. And it is still a truth that, 9 out of 10 women will experience a tear, but some tears they're just not the same. So there's like 4 stages of perineal tears. And the first one is really just, I'll get my model out here, like more superficial, like labia, little tears like right in here. And oftentimes they are, they heal on their own. They don't always need stitches and they're not really always bothersome. I don't want to say that, as a blanket statement, because some women might have struggles with that. Or they'll tear just a little direction here and it typically won't need stitches and it'll heal on its own. And like you said, it's just giving, it's your body giving the right way and just as much as somebody needs to give. And then stage 2 typically does need a little bit of stitches. It might come down, this direction a little bit more, but it's certainly not encroaching onto the anal sphincter, which is, where stage 3 is getting into the tissues right before. And stage 4 is actually coming into the sphincter, which these can be very severe and very challenging for women to heal from. And it's certainly no wonder we're all terrified of that. And so
as women, unfortunately, we tell horror stories to other women. And that's what you remember. You don't remember all the women that said, oh no, you know, I didn't have any tears, or I just
Yeah.
need stitches. It just, you know,
Mhm.
I've had providers say, oh, you just have a little skid mark, you know, it doesn't need any,
Yeah.
you know, just kind of a
Yeah.
little
Like just a
area,
light, and
like a
it's sort
rug
of
burn sort of thing. But
right. And
yeah.
it's so, and that is to be somewhat, it's understandable. The pelvis has to stretch it and trend a tremendous amount. The baby's head is coming through, but you're so right. I think as humans, like my theory on this is like evolutionarily, we are like geared to focus on the scary thing for like our survival. I don't know if that's really true, but it makes a little bit of sense to me. You know, we remember like, oh, that person had this like 4th-degree tear, and then they had like fecal incontinence, and now they're like pooping their pants and they're in so much pain and they can't have sex. You know, like those are the things that we
Right.
really latch onto, and we're like, oh
Yes.
my God, don't let that
That is
happen
a
to me.
very rare occurrence.
Yeah, it's not that common. So 9 out of 10 women does not represent, like, not 9 out of 10 are going to have a stage 4 tear. And that data doesn't really represent all of the preventative things that we know now
Right.
can be helpful. And so the first one is that perineal massage. So if you're looking at, and this is so amazing, like I had no idea when I was talking to you that like there was you know, different people were describing it in different ways. And like, I'm just like, everybody does it the way I do it, you know, like.
Yes, no, yeah,
So
yeah.
that was so, and I had actually spoken to a doula a few weeks ago when we were having a conversation about the perineal massage, and she was like, "Oh yeah, that doesn't work," and I was like, "Hang on, it does." And then
Right.
there's
It's
research to
only if
show,
you do it right, right? So it's
yeah,
only if you do it properly.
exactly.
So
And I
that's the
think
key. Yes, yes,
yes, this is so huge that we're having this conversation
right,
and bringing it to the public, because this is important. We don't
right.
want to be doing this wrong. If we do it wrong, we might, I mean, it, yeah, for sure isn't going to work, and it might actually make things worse. So
Right,
we're going
exactly.
to talk about how to do it. Okay, so here's your pelvis, and there's 2 bones here that make up your hip bones. And then they come around. Here's the front, the pubic symphysis, which is kind of where sometimes we can get that joint pain in the front of the pelvis if we have some asymmetries or trigger points in the pelvic floor. This is the pelvic floor, and this is just a muscle group that's really available to us, just like our bicep can contract. You know, we talk about Kegels, that's just some dead guy's name, but it's shorter than saying like pelvic floor muscle contraction. So Kegel is basically like being lifting up and in. So the muscles that go this way, and then they need to be able to fully relax back down again. So they contract to hold urine and stool in our body when we cough, laugh, jump, or sneeze. They relax when we pee, poop, and they need to be able to fully relax to give birth. So that's why it's so important that when we're pregnant or just in life, we need to have an awareness of this area. I mean, especially like you were talking about when you were going through pregnancy, I think like it hasn't been that long ago that we really didn't ever talk about this area. This is so
Right.
taboo. This is like your private bits. Like nobody wants to talk about that. And we're certainly not going to get a mirror out and take a look.
Yes,
Not to mention put a finger in there. Like no one was doing that. And that's still a thing.
yes,
Like a little sidebar, I was watching this like cooking show last night, and this lady was saying how she didn't have her husband at her birth because she'd heard if the man like sees the birth, then he won't see her like pelvis as sexual anymore. And I was like, what is this 2022? Like, what is happening? Like, what? This is like a pro. Okay, I was like, okay, whatever. So I mean, that's just like an example of how we haven't
as a
really.
doula, I have heard that many times. And
Oh my
mamas
God.
put dads up by their heads so they don't
Yeah.
see that and view them as something other than a sexual being, right?
Oh,
So
I guess, okay. So I guess I have to respect like that is that is certainly like, you know, maybe people have different dynamics in their relationship and things like that. I just feel like you're leaving him out of like one of the most powerful things that
absolutely, just seeing that baby emerge is just the most
yeah.
beautiful thing.
Yeah.
I'm
And
getting
to see,
goosebumps just thinking
yes,
about it. So yes,
yes. And to see you in your power, like
yes.
you are so much more than a sexual
Oh,
thing. Yeah, we're just gonna side note, that's it. So that's why it's important. And actually this is a funny kind of thing, like a lot of, and myself included, I kind of wish I had really taken a look here before I gave birth, because I didn't really get down there before. And then after, you're like, is everything okay? And you're like, I've never seen it before.
Right? So I don't know what it should look like.
I don't know. Yes.
Yeah,
In a mirror, I mean, like, even take a picture. I don't know. Honestly, I would have if I had really thought about it. Okay, so here's the perineum. When we're talking about perineal massage, we're talking about making sure that the muscle group between the vaginal opening and the anal sphincter can give a little bit better. And so if we've never even brought our brains to this area,
right.
there's a good chance that we're tight, and we are like, when we get stressed, we contract this area, and like a fight or flight kind of thing, like the same way we clench our jaw, we clench down here. And I treat so many women for pelvic pain and incontinence issues and bowel issues, and men too, because they're just stuck in a full-blown Kegel. So if you can imagine, like when you're trying to let that baby come out, if you're clenching here and you're scared and you're tense and you don't know how to relax, it's going to be like the baby versus your pelvic floor. so
end up causing the giving or the tearing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Baby has to win. It's a life or death thing, right? So you might experience more resistance to the baby's head coming out than you would if you're able to, like, kind of at least, even if you have an epidural and you can't bring your attention here that well, and you don't have the muscle memory, if you've done the work of the stretching beforehand, like the muscles at least have somewhere to go. Right. So if you can allow the muscles to sort of relax around baby's head a little bit, then you'll have a little bit less severe tearing. And then of course, if you do tear, even though you've done all the things that we've talked about, it's still not your fault. There's still so many other factors here. But we do know that this can definitely decrease your risk of having a more severe tear. So what you'll do is you can have your pelvic floor provider, being me, or you can have your partner, or you can do it yourself, do your perineal massage. So what I do is I come straight here, and if you are somebody other than mom, you're going to use your pointer finger, and you're going to come like just gently, and really just a little fingertip starting down here at the perineum. So this little space, so you're going to insert into the vagina and just gently hold. And if mom is really tight, you're going to feel some like soreness, kind of like a sore muscle, and you'll just be so gentle, and you'll just wait here until that soreness is gone. And then once that's gone, you're going to start working your way up, say like up the wall in either direction, just holding gently, pressing, and pretty superficial too. You're just kind of working on like the opening here. You don't have to get all deep in there.
Right.
You can for other reasons, but for just this birth prep, you're just going to do that. And you're just going to hold until you feel the soreness is gone, and up you go. And then you'll come around to the other side, same thing. And then you don't ever really want to like flip your finger and work this way, because the bladder's sitting right there, your urethra's there. So there's no need to kind of be stretching that out. You're just really focused on this muscle tissue and can it give? And you'll start that at about 34 weeks. You can do it anywhere between like 3 to 7 days a week, whatever is reasonable for you. And then I always recommend using a glove, especially if you're going to be doing it like five or more times a week, because you don't want to introduce a lot of bacteria, and just, fingernails are always a thing. And then just some lubricant. And so you'll do that. And then if you're mom, you can sit down against a wall and use your thumb, and same thing. You're just going to work your way up, each side, nice and slow, holding and pressing until any discomfort goes away. And so at first, if you're tight, it might take a little bit longer, like 10 minutes or so. But as you get better at it, or time goes on, the muscles start to relax a little bit more. It's going to just take a few minutes and not so long at all. And if you're not very tight and you go in there and you're like, yeah, I got no pain, this is no problem, you may not have to do it as frequently, but I still may be getting in there and connecting to this area and moving the tissues, but you don't have to be in there as much, probably, because you're not super tight and you're ready.
Awesome. Awesome. And I love how you said it's very gentle pressure, because I think that's where a lot of people we're doing it wrong. They were
Yes.
really pulling out. It's like,
Yes.
no, it's just a gentle
Yes.
pressure. And it's kind
Yes.
of like when if you're doing any kind of stretch of any muscles, where
Yeah.
you would bend until you feel that tightness, and you just
Yeah.
hold it there. You won't go past that. You
Yes.
just hold it there until it kind of, and breathe into that until it
And
gets,
breathe. And just to the beginning of that tension, not any further. And the reason is like, we don't have sensory abilities in the vagina the way we do like in the palm of our hands. So if I close my eyes and I poke, I'm like, oh yeah, I know exactly where that finger is. But in the vagina, it's harder. We don't know. We don't even really know how hard we're pushing a lot of the times until after we've done too much, and then we're in pain, and then it's like not good.
right.
So
Right.
just
Yeah.
gentle, and just be aware that you're not going to know if you're going, sometimes you may not know if you're pushing too hard. So always err on the side of caution with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I love
Yeah.
that. Love
So
that.
good.
One of the other things, as you were showing that, and that's
Yeah.
that muscle, and I'm gonna say, I know I'm gonna slaughter the name. It's
Oh,
pubococcygeus.
yeah.
Is
People
that
could
it?
see
Is that,
this.
did I say it right?
Yeah. Good
So it's
job.
a hammock muscle that attaches um from
Yeah.
your perineum,
Uh-huh.
or
Yeah.
from the coccyx bone.
Yeah.
It's like a hammock, right?
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah, it does come to the coccyx, and it's kind of part of the bigger group of muscles in the pelvic floor.
right.
Um, and it comes around the anal sphincter and attaches to the coccyx. Yes. And then there's another muscle, coccygeus, which also attaches to the coccyx. They kind of work similarly, but yes.
And so one of the things I tell clients to do
Yeah.
is do a lot of supported squats, because what that does is it
Mhm.
helps stretch that and elongates it, and helps
Yeah.
loosen that up. So, and what I mean by supported squats is, if you're comfortable squatting, just squatting down on and not being supported because you've been
Yeah.
doing a lot of yoga or whatever, that's great. But if you're
Mhm.
not comfortable with that, especially with a big belly and stuff like that, you want to
Yeah.
make sure you're supported either with just like the yoga blocks underneath your
Yes.
butt or something, and
Yeah.
that sort of thing. But the squats daily can really help as well,
Yeah.
elongate that muscle and have it be looser
Mhm.
and not as tight.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. When you think about like pooping, um, it we really pubococcus just plays a big role, like you're kind of alluding to here. And
Yeah,
in pooping and in childbirth, the best position for us is to have our hips at a 90-degree angle, because it shortens the canal between, the exit and like the actual organ. And so, and
right.
it also allows pubococcus to relax. So when we have the hips up at 90 degrees, and that's like a deep, deep squat, then we can just, the poop just comes out. And so that's kind of why we're into the squatty potty and all that stuff now. It's super
Right.
important because in other countries, we are always in a deep squat. And um, like my husband's Vietnamese, and like if you go to Vietnam, like people are like sleeping on the side of the road, like in a deep squat. It's like, what? And then here we're just sitting in like a 90-degree chair all the time, and we're trying to
Yes.
poop. And oftentimes that doesn't allow the pubococcygeus or like the pelvic floor to really relax. And
Yeah.
same in childbirth, that's so important. And a lot of women do have tailbone trauma. And I think that this could be a big part of that, is not having that pubococcygeus relax, not being in a position where the sacrum can sort of lift up and off. And that can cause some trauma to the tailbone, perhaps. And then also if pubococcygeus is tight, and it's often tight like asymmetrically, like maybe baby's getting kind of stuck there and
Right.
prolonging labor and increasing the amount of strain that you have to undergo, and then maybe even contributing to hemorrhoid development, and it just goes on and on. And
Yes.
so the deep squat thing is so big, and I love it. And I think that intuitively, this is how we should be birthing. That's how they do it in Vietnam. Like my husband's mom pushed babies out in a deep squat. Now,
Yeah.
the research, unfortunately, shows that in our culture, a deep squat position for pushing could increase your risk of tearing. And I think that is because we're just not used to being in it. And
Right.
so,
Yeah.
yeah, like, because if you've never been in a deep squat in your life, and like you don't have the spine range of motion or the hip range of motion, and
Yeah.
then you're like, I'm going to give birth in this position, you get down, and like, yeah, things aren't going to go very well.
Yeah.
So I think that's really the key there. So if you're able to practice during pregnancy or even before you're thinking about getting pregnant and just, make it a part of your life, getting into that deep squat and being able to do that. I mean, that requires ankle mobility, upper back mobility, hip mobility, and all that's so important for us, like to have longevity, knee mobility. Like,
Yes,
I
right.
think as a side note, I think this is why there's fewer like total knee replacements and stuff in more developing nations, other than lack of resources, just because they're bent, like they're giving more nourishment to their joints, being in their deep squat, more than we are. So yeah, practicing. And if you've got it, if you can deep squat, then so utilize that to your advantage. Like,
Yeah,
definitely
exactly.
practice. Yes.
And start off
Mhm.
with just being supported, and
Yeah.
if that's that's perfect. That still helps that to stretch in that area to stretch.
Exactly. And that's huge too, is like relaxing pelvic floor is when one good cue is to bring your breath to your anal sphincter and see if you can just like let it unpucker and see if you
Right.
can give it some air.
And
Mhm.
relaxing the jaw as you're pushing,
Yes.
like not having this
Mhm.
tight clenched jaw, because that when
Mhm.
you're tightening this muscle, that muscle tightens as well. And
So
so
true. Yeah.
keeping your
Yeah.
mouth open,
Oh, yeah.
tongue on the roof
And
of
like,
your mouth so it can't, so you've got that opening.
yes.
Ear can help that opening as well.
And
So
like low tones, I don't know,
yes,
like a like stuff like that. So women like to do
right.
that because that helps relax the jaw, which then in turn helps relax pelvic floor. They're like embryologically linked. So like they developed kind of similarly in utero, the
Yes,
jaw and the pelvic floor, and they're just inextricably connected. So yeah,
yes,
important
I
stuff.
love it. I love it. Exactly. The other thing that's on my list, but you talk about it as well, is how a woman pushes, the position she's in,
Oh yeah.
is in that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And not just like doing the purple face, blue,
Yeah.
blue face
Yeah.
thing,
Yeah.
but listening to your body and pushing in a way that helps
Absolutely.
everything be loose down there as you're pushing out. Do you
Yeah.
want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yes. So first, let's talk about how to push. So, like historically, it's been definitely a purple, like hold your breath and push, and bear down. And we call that a Valsalva, which is also some dead guy's name. But it's basically just holding your breath.
They're named after dead guys, yeah.
Yep. Lucky guys. It's basically just holding your breath and bearing down. And a lot of people actually do that on the toilet already. They, which is pretty dysfunctional, unfortunately, or they are doing that when they lift things that are heavy, um, because we think that this is going to help, like, give us some power. And I think in a way, I think healthcare providers may have seen, like in some extreme circumstances, that they'll coach women to do that if they think that that's going to like shoot the baby right out or something. And maybe it does, like maybe they have good reasons, but the research is sort of showing us that the best way to push is to really not coach the woman at all. And when she's not coached, she typically breathes through the push, and she'll typically do like an exhale as she's pushing. And that is really congruent with our anatomy, because the way that we kind of, when the air is leaving our thorax, that's when we can recruit our core most optimally, because we have this like negative pressure system. So as we're exhaling, as you can imagine, like if there's a canister full of air, it can kind of like compress, and then you're like, and then your core can kind of help you load a little bit and then help like let the baby come out. And so this takes a little bit of technique. The way that I teach women to prepare for birth, I'm not in the room with them, so I don't typically coach them, but you are, which is so cool. I have them like exhale, gently pull your belly in, and then relax down through pelvic floor. So you're like exhaling, belly is kind of cinching in, and then pelvic floor is like expanding and relaxing. So it's a coordinated technique, because
Yes.
another way I teach women to breathe is to exhale and pull belly in and then contract pelvic floor if they're like moving around in their life, postpartum, lifting something heavy. But when you're on the toilet or when you're going through birth, you want pelvic floor to open and relax. So exhaling, pulling belly in and then relaxing pelvic floor. That's how I would push. That's what I would say. And that's the most natural way for like, just when we're looking at our anatomy, that's how our bodies work. Like normally we just get kind of caught up in doing some like funky stuff. Because the truth is when we hold our breath, our pelvic floor contracts to keep our organs in our body. So it's like, oh no, we're under stress. Like we need to contract. So then we're pushing against, we're pushing baby's head against contracted muscles. And yeah, that's going to increase your risk for tearing for sure. And then the other problem is like, it's just not good for you. So prolonged like Valsalva is going to really increase your risk for hemorrhoids tremendously. Pelvic organ prolapse, because you're like holding your breath and pushing, and your poor organs are just getting like pushed down on. So 4 hours of that's rough on your organs. You're definitely increasing your risk of pelvic organ prolapse with that. And then you get like the blood vessels bursting and like the face is like, this just isn't good. Like this is not right.
And the eyes, the blood vessels in the eyes even burst. Yeah.
Yes. And so I tell women, like, I'll coach them through how to push optimally. And then, ideally when they get to it, you'd want to just let them do their thing. And then sometimes in the hospital or in other cases, they might ask you like, all right, I just need you to hold your breath and push now. And hopefully they have a medical reason for that or some kind of justification.
Right. Sure.
And then, once again, I say, hey, I did 4 hours of that and I'm okay. Like, once again, you can heal from anything you go through, but ideally, I think it's all about the breathing through it. And then the low tones, you can do that too, because that's the same thing. So like, you're relaxing pelvic floor and you're doing the same kind of exhalation. So that's and that's a good one, because that gives you the visual of like a lowering, kind of centering down. And that's exactly what you want. And then go ahead. I'm sorry.
What about women who don't have a lot of feeling because maybe they got an epidural? So that a little bit. And they don't always feel what they need to feel in order to do what you're talking about. So
they don't know where baby is, and they things like that. So there's a couple of tricks here that you can use. You can ask for an epidural that's like a little less intense, and maybe you feel like a little bit but not a ton. That's totally an option for you. And also the practice beforehand is so important. So when you're pregnant, like getting it into muscle memory, boom, that's everything. Like if you're like, I know how to do it because I've done it a bajillion times and like I'm ready, that's huge. And then if it comes down to it, some practitioners really believe like you have an epidural, like you can't to push the way you need to, like I have to coach you, blah, blah, blah. And like, and sometimes that's true. Sometimes they do have to tell you when it's time to push because you don't feel it. And once again, the research suggests that we don't coach women when to push, and then except perhaps in the circumstance of an epidural, when they can see on the screen that you're having a contraction and like push now. If you're unmedicated, then just do it freely. But if you're having an epidural, which I had, 100%, sometimes you can feel a little bit enough like intuitively to push. And then sometimes you do need some coaching. And then sometimes you're kind of at the hands of the providers. Like for me, they came in and they had like this intervention and they're like, hey, if you don't start trying soon, like you're going to have a C-section. And I didn't really feel super empowered to continue pushing the way that I had really wanted to. So I did do it their way. And I mean, it didn't work, but that's okay. It never was going to. I think it was just my situation. It was just totally different from any woman who's going to have a baby.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
the doula, I have seen it work for them helping when the mama just couldn't get that. But those mamas didn't practice the way what you're talking about. And, a lot of them couldn't feel because they didn't have an epidural or weren't able to get in a position that was easily for them to work with their body. So I think that's another big one is position. And like we say, women who are laying on their back, the the
Yeah.
coccyx bone gets pushed up like this. So there's
Yeah.
room for baby to come out. Whereas if you're in a squat or hands and knees, your coccyx bone can come back.
Exactly.
More room for baby to come
So
out.
yeah, that's so important because like you say, the coccyx actually, like the whole sacrum actually lifts up and off. It's unbelievable. It
Right.
like it does that. So the research tells us that any upright position that frees the tailbone is good to help you decrease tearing because it allows that to happen. So that's, like we talked about, deep squat isn't in the research, but we know that that's useful. And then child's pose, quadruped, even like standing or, whatever position feels, side lying is a beautiful one.
Yes. Yeah.
All of those you can get into with your epidural too. And so that's a good conversation to have with your healthcare provider before you do go into labor. Like, is this a culture where they'll allow me to roll around in bed and like flip over and do all those things? And you can get in all those positions except standing with an epidural. And and that will help you to bring baby down, and that'll help decrease your risk of tearing 100%. Yes. So important. Yeah. And that's true. Like, I think that it's unusual. Most women, even with an epidural, are gonna, like, especially if they're able to employ the things that we're talking about, are gonna have like a beautiful vaginal birth. And it's definitely not as common to have, situations with C-sections and things like that, especially now. And especially here in New Mexico at UNM, like they're really good about not doing C-sections that aren't, really necessary. So yeah, also knowing that too, that like it's totally okay, like if it doesn't go that way as well, and that's also fine. You can heal from anything.
Definitely. And that's the thing too. So we'll get to that part too, but the other couple of things I'd like to mention is hydration. So hydration is super important in helping to prevent tearing, because your skin is the last place that gets the hydration of the water you drink. So your organs get it first, all these other parts, your skin is the last place. So if you're dehydrated, your skin can tear easier. Just like if you get dehydrated, if you're not a good water drinker, then you can get the crow's feet early on, and that sort of thing too, because your skin suffers from it. So being hydrated is super important. And here in New Mexico, we live in a desert, so hydration is even more important. But I have to then say, on the other side, if you're drinking enough water, a lot of water to stay hydrated, you also should be getting some electrolytes as well, because I made that mistake of drinking so much water that I depleted my body of electrolytes and ended up in the hospital. So, so make sure you're getting electrolytes as well. But there are other things besides just drinking water that can hydrate your body. So apples are a really good snack that they're filled with water. They can help hydrate your body, as well as iceberg lettuce, which everybody's like, iceberg has no nutrition, but it does have a lot of water. So if you're an iceberg lettuce lover, that's great. Getting you some water. So if you're one of those people who just can't drink, a gallon of water a day, try at least eating some apples and iceberg lettuce and that sort of thing to help get you hydrated. And add flavoring to your water. I mean, don't make it boring. Keep a thing of water in there with fresh lemon. I used to have a pitcher in my refrigerator with 2 or 3 fresh lemons cut and in the water. And
so
just
good.
Drink
Raspberries or cucumbers. Absolutely.
So make it fun, make it enjoyable, make it something you want to do. But hydration is important to help prevent tearing. Also, good nutrition is really important, which people don't think about that. But because of the hormonal changes as we're pregnant, the cervix and the perineum become extremely thick and elastic. And so the process of taking in a lot of protein. So protein is super important. Vitamin E and the short chain fatty acids. So like the omega-3s and omega-6s are really important, as well as vitamin C. Those can all help get your skin more down there, more elastic and pliable.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So important.
Yeah.
And that's where I think a doula is like life when it comes to labor, because you can provide water and like encourage mom to drink. And like, I think I went like 3 days without drinking water. Like, I
Oh
was like,
my gosh.
yeah, like, and that like your
And
partner
that could have been
typically doesn't.
why you had some problems too. And when your
Absolutely.
body gets dehydrated or doesn't have the
Yeah.
energy it needs
Yeah.
to push or
Yeah.
to
Oh, yeah.
then it's your body kind of
100%.
protects
Yeah.
itself. So then it stops
Mhm.
focusing on the birthing
Yep.
process and only focuses on your organs and
Yes.
protecting you. So yeah,
So
making sure
important.
you
And
eat
like,
and drink during labor as well is
yes,
important.
like if
And then
you
I
like,
tell my clients that and some people, this is kind of like, whoa, but having a lot of sex when you're pregnant, it
yeah,
helps get those tissues and everything loose and stretched and it's
absolutely.
so good for
Yeah.
helping to prevent tearing. Dads
Yeah, it
love it when
is.
I say that.
Yeah.
But
No, it's so true though, because like having an orgasm will help tone your muscles of your pelvic floor as well. So
yeah, yeah,
it's so true.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Love those tips. Those are
So
important.
now that we've covered like those things that can help
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
preventing tearing, let's talk a little bit about, so let's say somebody did tear and it
Yeah.
was kind of a bad one and they're
Yeah.
having trouble healing from it. Tell them
Yeah.
how a pelvic floor physical therapist can help them with that.
Oh my gosh, it's so important. Oh, yeah. So if you had a pretty good tear, yeah, just remember like, not your fault, even if you did all the things. Like, there's birth is crazy. There's things that happen. Now, I will say, most of my clients don't tear, and I know most of yours don't either. So, there's definitely things you can do to help prevent, but if it happens, not your fault. It's okay. Um, babies are babies, birth is birth, things happen and you can heal. And the way that we deal with this, so of course I help with both C-section and perineal, but we'll start with the perineal if you tear, and if you get stitches especially. So it'll be about 6 weeks before we do any internal work. You can start kind of rehabbing your core right away with like a little bit of breathing, inhale, exhale, gently pulling belly in. You can start doing that, but probably no Kegels until that's pain-free and until you're not feeling so like raw and and stitched. So we sometimes I'll help like rehab without the internal exam. If mommies need that, depends on what their needs are. But a lot of times it'll be like a 6-week follow-up where you get your stitches out with your provider and then you'll come and see me. And then we can start doing scar tissue work, because the vagina is a very elastic space and it needs to stretch in every direction. And if it can't stretch in the direction of your scar tissue, because that's adhered down, that can cause a lot of pain, especially during sex, and can predispose you to another tear with the next baby. And so that's important that we really rehab the scar tissue. Scar tissue lies down randomly if we don't give it direction. So we want to do internal massage with the scar tissue as soon as we can. It's never too late, but optimally, as soon as that's healing and healed enough for us to go in and do internal work, we'll go in and we'll do like massage work, and I'll teach you how to do that on your own at home. And then we want to make sure that everything is symmetrically strong in the area, because you kind of rip through a muscle group that's very important for your life to be wholesome and not full of pee leaks. And so we want to make sure, and prolapse, having a big tear down there can increase your risk of the organs losing support and falling down into the vaginal opening. So we want to be sure that we're getting your abdominal wall nice and strong, and we are really symmetrical and strong in the pelvic floor so that you can contract symmetrically without like your little space sort of lagging behind, and relax symmetrically. So that's so important that we rehab that, and just to prevent pee leaks and prolapse and
And it will also prevent in future pregnancies from baby being asynclitic. So meaning over to one side or the other side, or not
yes,
straight on
yes,
the way they need to, because of that tightness in one side and looseness in the other. So
yes,
it
you
will
want
help
to
that
have
as well.
Exactly. And it's so possible for you to fully heal from this and to have that symmetry. Again, it just takes the right support and nurturing and
Excellent,
really important work. Yeah.
excellent, excellent. So we could go on and talk about this forever, but I'd like to kind of wrap up a little bit
Yeah.
and say that the perineum, so that your tissue in your vagina, your perineum, all that area
Yeah.
is the fastest healing tissue in your body besides your
Yeah.
mouth.
Yeah.
Please don't be afraid of that part too. It
Yes.
heals very, very, very quickly.
Yes.
And like Talia said, this is not about, oh, well, you did this wrong. You did everything right. Even if you didn't hear this message and didn't do the
Yeah.
work beforehand and
Yeah.
had a bad experience, you can still heal from it. So
Yeah.
please
Mhm.
contact somebody to help them
Mhm.
heal. It's really important
Yeah.
as women that we lift each other up and help each other no matter
Yeah.
what our experience was. So
Exactly.
and I really appreciate you, Talia, for
Thank you.
donating your time today to talk with me about this. And
Of
I think it's
course.
such an important topic because even though most people don't want to talk about it, it is
Yeah.
one of those things that most people are worried about or afraid of
Yes.
going in as they're pregnant and going into the
Yes.
third trimester. So
Yes.
it's so
And the
important,
message
and
is
I
like,
really appreciate you talking to us today. And you guys will have to stay tuned and check back in because Talia and I have got some other great topics that we're going to be covering as well down the road.
absolutely.
So, but thank you again, and thank you everybody for joining us today and for watching our little mini class. Let's do this mini class, and we will see you next time. Thanks.
Love it. Thanks so much, Kim.